That's it. All right, guys, welcome. My name is Tim Garcia. So this month I decided I was going to talk about Yara, and I may throw in some Yara stuff in there. So again, Yara was originally what I was going to talk about, and then I talked with John a little bit, and we decided that Zeek/Bro is something that I think more people would get a little bit more information off of. Also, I kind of had some travel and things coming up, so I'm a little bit more familiar with Zeek. I'm doing a lot with Yara right now in terms of doing file analysis. But so as part of the demo, if I get to it, depending on time, I will throw in a little bit of Yara stuff in there. But we want to talk about Zeek. So just a little bit about me. You know, I won't go too in detail because you guys probably don't care. Some of you have already seen me before. But I work for Wells Fargo. I'm an information security engineer. I'm on our security content development team. So what we're doing is we're looking at our sandboxes, we have Palo Alto, but we also have FireEye. But we're looking at our next-gen firewalls. We're looking at our sandboxes. And my team's job is to analyze that information, right? To provide content development, looking for signatures of malware, looking for signatures of malicious files. Prior to that, I was the information security officer for the auto finance department. I teach for SANS periodically, and I teach a lot of their blue team courses. Mainly, I've taken a lot of their red team courses, but primarily I'm a blue teamer. I'm all about defense, and primarily I'm about detection, right? You guys, I mean, I love prevention. I wish I could prevent everything, but we know that we cannot prevent everything. And so again, I've used the FortiGates before, the Fortinet firewalls. They're awesome products. Again, in my environment, we use different products. So again, what I wanted to talk about was primarily Zeek and this concept of an intrusion detection system. Now, I looked at the presentation, or at least the bio or the definition, and again, a lot of people have heard of Zeek before, but it was formerly known as Bro. And about a year ago, there was a change in the name, and the Bro name goes back to Big Brother, and a lot of times they said, well, you know, people don't really understand that anymore. No one really understands the 1984 George Orwell book because, again, it was, you know, Big Brother's always watching. But Zeek, and there was this negative connotation to the word bro, right? You know, bro culture and, you know, oh, I'm a bro, you know, frat boy mentality, those type of things. So they decided to go with the name change. So in the description of the talk, it was like, hey, we're going to talk about Zeek and Bro, but Zeek is Bro. Zeek and Bro are the exact same things. It's just been renamed. And what is it? Well, it's an intrusion detection system. But it's not an intrusion detection system in the classic sense, right? It doesn't have signatures. It doesn't do anomaly detection. It has a good, solid understanding of the various network protocols. So I run Zeek on my network, and I monitor the network traffic, and it says, hey, that's an HTTP file. I'm going to put it in the HTTP log. Hey, that's a DNS connection. I'm going to put that in the DNS log. Oh, that's an SSL connection. I'm going to put that in the SSL log. Or that's a certificate going across the wire. I'm going to put that in the X.509 logs. So it has a good, solid understanding of all of these various network protocols, and it can analyze that traffic and say, hey, I'm just going to put it in the logs. And then it requires you as the analyst to go in and understand the traffic. Okay, and that's why I say, oh no, here, right? I have to apply the intelligence to my network traffic, which sometimes can be very frustrating and a little bit scary because we all know that there's a skills gap in information security. We all know that there's a shortage of analysts that can understand network traffic. And a lot of us struggle to know our networks. But that's where the power of Zeek comes in, right? Formerly known as Bro, because it gives me a good, solid understanding of, hey, this is the traffic I'm seeing on my network. And, you know, if I have, let's say, classic log analysis, let's say I have a IIS web server, or I have an Apache web server, or Nginx. So I have to collect those logs off of that endpoint in some way, right? I can use syslog, I can use Windows Event Forwarding, I can install some third-party agent on that box that collects those logs and ships them over into my SIEM. And that works pretty well. But the problem is what if I have IIS 6 and 7 and 8 and 8.5 and what if I have Apache 2.1.3 and 2.1.6? Now I have to have a custom parser for every one of those versions of Apache, every one of those versions of IIS. But if I throw something like Zeek on my network and it says, hey, there's HTTP traffic going across the network, it takes that and puts it in the log, and it's in a consistent format regardless of whether it's Apache or Nginx or IIS, because HTTP is HTTP. And also, what Eric talked about, you know, asset inventory is hard. Not all of us know every device on our network. So if I'm doing classic log collection where I'm using an agent, I don't know what happened here, I almost lost my balance. But if I'm doing an agent, that requires somebody to install that agent and follow our standard build. And I know this never happens in any of your environments, but sometimes we have somebody who doesn't follow change control. Okay, and I know that that probably never happens to you, but someone goes up and spins up their own virtual machine, installs Apache on it, and starts serving up web files out to the internet. I run simple HTTP server on my machine to send files across the network. Okay, that's a Python module, and I can just easily do that. I did that just the other day to do some testing because I wanted to send some web traffic and see if I could actually detect it with my Yara rule. And so I just filed up ran Python -m simple HTTP server, ran it on port 8080, started sending files back and forth. Okay, I didn't follow change control. I didn't walk through the process. I didn't install an agent. But if there's HTTP traffic going across my network and my Zeek sensor sees it, it will say, hey, that's HTTP traffic, and put it in the HTTP log. So I can know my environment. I can capture all that traffic going across my environment. Now, we can do signature analysis, but it's really built for scripting and being able to analyze the data in those static logs, right? And then ideally ingest that into some automated analysis engine, right? Be able to correlate it with things coming from your FortiGates or from some other different endpoint security solution, some type of appliance, and being able to pull all that data in. Now, it's been around since 1995. Okay, so it's over 25 years old. And people say, well, do I really want to trust a product that's been around since 1995? I mean, 1995, was there even an internet back then, right? I mean, I remember I was in the Navy back in 1995, and I was skipping around across the water, not doing anything to do with information security. Okay? And so, but the good thing about that has been it's been developed since 1995. And some of you may know the name Richard Baitlick. Richard Baitlick, who is considered the father of network security monitoring, he wrote the Tao of Network Security Monitoring, the practice of network security monitoring. He actually works for Corelight, who does the commercial support for Zeek now. Okay, it received federal funding in 2010, which gave them the ability to have full-time developers. But it's free, it's open source. It's fully integrated into Security Onion, which is my favorite way to actually implement it, because that also gives you the additional capabilities of having traditional IDS with something like Snort or Suricata. It also gives you the SEM products with the Elastic Stack, and it also gives you the ability to capture traffic and analyze those alerts with something like Squill. But again, it's free open source. It comes with over 10,000 built-in scripts already, and there's a good community of people that are actually adding to additional scripting capabilities. Okay, so it also allows you to build your own custom scripts if you have a little bit of programming chops. Now, as I said, Zeek is now Bro. So some of you, how many of you have heard of Bro before, have used it? Okay, a couple of you, right? And so I will dip back and forth because I've called it Bro for 15 years. And so when I present and I talk about it, I almost always revert back and say Bro at some point. But this is now Zeek, okay? It was, again, an Orwellian reminder that monitoring comes hand in hand with the potential for privacy violations. We're going to monitor network traffic. And you have things like GDPR and other things, and you're like, oh, we can't do that. We can't analyze that traffic in our environment. Well, this gives you the ability, if you can, to be able to look at what's going across your network. And it's very easy to implement. Okay, as we said, the term Bro has some negative connotations in today's environment, so that kind of changed. Right? But the name Zeek, why did they choose Zeek? Well, Zeek was the dog from the old Far Side commercial, or comics, right? So some of you may have remembered Far Side, and it was actually the name of the service account that was originally used in the initial implementations of Bro. So they had to choose a name for the service account, and they just called it Zeek. And so they renamed, they said, yeah, they went through this whole process of recommendations and people submitting different names for it, and they said, okay, Zeek. Zeek is going to be the name because it harkens back to the original implementation, and again, it's Zeek security, and it goes back to this concept of Zeek and you shall find. Okay, so again, you can get it from Zeek.org. Commercial support is provided by Corelight, and again, it's just a way to analyze network traffic, and it gives you the ability to capture that traffic regardless. Okay, so it listens on the network and it creates logs. That's what it does. You set up a sensor, a monitor, and it monitors your network traffic. You can have it connected to a span port, mirror port. You can just monitor what's going across your network. It has over 35 different network protocols that it understands. Okay? I mean, this is a list here. You have FTP, remote desktop protocol. IRC, SMTP, SSL, SSH. It understands all these protocols natively and just says, hey, that's SSL communication. Now, well, you say, well, what is that? What value does that do for me? Okay, there's been a lot of talk today about things like SSL inspection. Eric talked about, hey, only a small portion of people are doing that. And they showed us the graph where, hey, they only have about a 15% performance impact when it comes to SSL inspection. And all of us should be like, yay, only 15%. How many of us can afford a 15% performance impact on our mission critical applications or high volume transactions? Not very many of us. That's why none of us or very few of us are doing it. When the question was asked, how many of you are doing SSL inspection? Eric raised his hand. Most of us didn't. Why? Because it's too resource intensive for us. So with something like SSL, what I can do is I can say, okay, well, hey, that's SSL communication going across. Now I can't inspect the payload. We know it's encrypted. But I can look at the information that is going across in clear text. What goes across the wire in clear text for SSL communications? Certificates, right? All that certificate. I heard someone mention it, right? So certificate goes across the wire in clear text. And so if certificates are going across the wire, well, can I at least whitelist and say, hey, these are certificates I allow, right? Do I want to allow my customers, my clients, my employees to go to wellsfargo.com? Well, I work for Wells Fargo. Of course I do. Do I want them to go to Bank of America? Maybe. Do I want them to allow them to go to Amazon? Sure. Why not, right? Let them do a little bit of shopping. It's Christmas time. We have stuff going on, and I know my employees are busy. I'm going to do a little bit of shopping, okay? But what I can do is I can say, hey, these particular SSL certificates are allowed, and these ones, hey, those are weird. Those are ones I wouldn't expect, right? This one was, this one has a name of QXY379J dot nothing. No dot, no org, no .com, no AU. Maybe it's going to .tk. And so, well, what is TK? Well, that's the Tolkiens. Well, why does this small island nation of only about 1,300 people have their own domain? Because that's the way it works, and they've basically farmed it out for anybody who wants to give it to get free domains and use it for malware or whatever they want. So again, I can look at that and say, hey, well, anything going to .tk, I'm going to at least alert on. I'm going to investigate. I'm going to detect it and say, this seems odd for my environment. Now, I can't look at the payload, but I can go in and I can start to say, hey, this is information that I want to allow based upon encrypted communications. And this is information which I don't necessarily know and categorize it as suspicious. And then based upon that, I'll then correlate it with other pieces of information. And that's one of the values of something like Zeek, is because now every one of my files has a unique identifier. And I can say, okay, well, hey, this information came in. It came in over SMTP. And I had an SMTP email come in, and hey, that CEO clicked on it. And, Eric's going in here and saying, well, 60% of... How many of you have ever clicked on a phishing email? Oh, I have. Right? I'm not ashamed to admit it. These guys are really good. Right? I clicked on it. It was like slow motion. It was like, no. Right? I was like, no, I knew it was phishing, but I couldn't help myself. I'm like, no. And I clicked, and then I was like, ah. And then my little pop-up came out and was like, oh, thank you, Fish Me. Fish Me got me, right? Because it was a very good one. And I wasn't expecting, I was busy, things were going on. I'm like, hey, I want to know about this. This is important. Oh, that UPS shipment just came in. Yeah, I clicked on it. All right, so again, we can sit here and we can make fun of people, but these attackers are very, very good at what they do. They've done their reconnaissance. They know what we're expecting. They know who are the other people in our organizations that are going to send this email. So again, I don't laugh at people who get hit by phishing. I don't make fun of them. I just want to deal with them. Yes?
They do A/B testing. So they
yeah,
know which
exactly.
better.
Exactly. They have, and again, that's the other thing, is that you don't think that nation-state attackers have a FortiGate in their lab? I'm sure, because not that they would, but if they go to FortiGate and say, hey, we'd like to pay you a bunch of money to sell us an appliance, they're going to be like, here you go, right? Not again, but Cisco will do the same, Juniper will do the same, Palo will do the same, because they're a for-profit company. They're a for-profit company, and they want to make money. Again, and they don't necessarily know that they're evil. They don't know that they're a nation state. They just know, hey, this customer wants to buy my product. Let me sell it to them. Okay? So again, they're going to test all of the stuff that you have in your environment. They're going to figure out how to evade it. But what we want to do is know our normal, know our network. And this is one of the things that Zeek can do. Okay? It's very hard for me to protect my environment unless I know about it. Right? My wife, she comes to me with some of these, and she knows our house like the back of her hand. When my kids were little, we'd come in from going, being at the dinner or whatever, and she'd be like, something's wrong. I'm like, what's going on? Was there someone in the house? She's like, no, something's different about the house. And I'm like, how do you know? And she'd walk over and she'd like look at the lamp and she'd turn it sideways, and sure enough, on the other side of the lamp, a little crack. I'm like, how did you know? She's like, well, because that's not the way I had it when I set it up. Okay, the lamp was turned, and I know because she knows our house. Okay, we want to get to that point in our network where we know when something is just a little bit odd. And that's where Zeek can provide, because it gives us this good understanding of all of this network traffic. And then I take that information and I correlate it together with all these other various logs, and I can say, hey, this is what's going on in my environment. So how do we do it, right? Very simple. I go in, connect it to a span port or mirror port on my network. I just drop and go. Now, again, here we have this email comes in to my end user. Comes to the mail server, mail relay relays it to the end user gets that. They click on the link. Well, what happens when I click on the link? Oh, well, I need to go in and I need the IP address associated with that URL. So it goes out, does a DNS request to the DNS server. My Zeek sensor captures that, puts it in the DNS log. And then it goes and gives me the IP address. I do my SYN-SYN-ACK three-way handshake, get index.html. I do an HTTP request to the web proxy. Web proxy sees that. My Zeek sensor sees that. And now I've got the SMTP email that came in. I've got the DNS request to get the IP address. I've got the HTTP request out to the information. And I got index.html. And now inside of my Zeek log, I have a files log that shows me all of those files that came in. And it's all correlated together with that unique identifier inside of my Zeek sensor. And now I can look and I can say, okay, here's where it came in. Here's what email was clicked on. Here's the HTTP request that was made. All that information goes back and forth. Now, one of the things we have to concern ourselves with is duplication. And again, let's say I have my client over here and they do a DNS request. I have my Zeek sensor sitting here. It captures that DNS request. I go in, I capture it going to the DNS server. There's a possibility that I get a duplicate record. Very easy to filter out. It has a scripting capability that I can just go in and I can easily filter out using Berkeley packet filters, or just going out and remove all that information. Okay, so again, it's not really a big issue, but it's just something I want to mention because, again, you don't want that duplication of logs if you don't have it, right? It's just a bunch of extraneous information that you do not need, right? So the scripting engine allows you to do pre-analysis and filtering, and also create custom logs if you want for whatever you want to do. I know I'm going a little fast, so I'm going to slow it down. So the best way I found, at least personally, to implement it is with Security Onion. Now, Security Onion is, I think I've talked about it before, one of my favorite tools, because it's a fully functional network security monitoring solution. A lot of people say, well, it's like Kali Linux for the blue team. No, Kali Linux is meant for one pen tester to run one time against one machine or against multiple machines and do pen testing. Network Security Onion is a fully functional network security monitoring solution, enterprise grade, completely free and open source. Now, some of you may work in an environment where you may say, I need commercial support. So commercial support is provided by Doug Burke's company, Security Onion Solutions. And I know Doug, he's a very cool, interesting guy. And he will actually, again, I've had to email Doug a few times, and I don't pay for commercial support for Security Onion. I emailed him one time, it was like 10 o'clock at night, and he lives in Augusta, Georgia, and I live here in Phoenix, obviously. And he emailed me back like 15 minutes later, and it was like, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, what are you doing? Do you not sleep? But he provided free support for me because I was not because I knew him back then. He just is going to provide that information. Now, I don't know if he still does that. This was a few years ago, but I was just having some trouble setting up Security Onion. And he provided free support for me, even though I don't pay for it. But you can get commercial support if you need it. Okay, it handles hundreds of sensors. It contains, as I said, the traditional IDSs of Snort or Suricata. Now, for those of you that are Snort, I'm Snort from way back, but I would encourage you to take a look at Suricata, right? So Suricata is actually a pretty good solution. It's multi-threaded. It actually has, it's kind of an integration of Snort and Zeek because it has that understanding of that network protocols. It can actually do bidirectional flow data, and it can do a lot of other things that it understands that HTTP traffic, right? So again, if you're doing something like Snort and you're like, hey, I want to write this rule to look for this particular signature in HTTP traffic. Well, what you do with Snort is you say, hey, where does HTTP traffic go to? Well, it goes on port 80. Or what if someone's sending HTTP traffic over port 8080 or 9043 or 42627? Well, the snort rule says I'm looking for that traffic on port 80. And if it's going off port 80 or 81 or 85 or 42,863, that snort rule is going to miss it. With something like Suricata is going to say, hey, that's HTTP traffic. I don't care whether it's 80, 81, 42,623. That's HTTP traffic. So it's kind of like a marriage of snort and Zeek together. So it's in my opinion, it has a lot of functionality. And it understands and has capabilities of being able to do the same type of rule syntax that you would with snort. So again, it's kind of like a good middle ground, I would say, between snort and Zeek. It does full PCAP storage. You can do a full PCAP. Now, one of the other things I've seen with Zeek is that there are a lot of organizations that can't support full PCAP. We don't have the disk space. We don't have the money. But what we can do is say, okay, well, I can go in and drop some Zeek sensors or some security onion sensors in various different locations across my network. And then instead of doing full PCAP, ideally, I'd love to have full PCAP so I can see that full, recording of exactly what went on. But at least I can capture the connections. At least I can capture the HTTP traffic. So if you haven't done this, right, if you don't have full PCAP with Security Onion, you can't support it, but at least you can have an understanding of, hey, the network traffic that's going back and forth. And you have that correlation between those various systems, various different logs going across your environment. Now, again, you can also install Zeek directly. If you go to github.com Zeek, or you go to zeek.org, you can actually see the information. Now, what's the difference between snort and Suricata? Well, as I said, snort, Suricata is classic intrusion detection. It does anomaly detection. It has a set of rules and says, hey, look for this particular signature inside of this traffic. Whereas Zeek just goes out and says, hey, I'm just going to pull out this information. So here's an example, right? We do, again, this is not the way you would run it, but what you can do is you can read in a PCAP. So I do bro tac r, read in this PCAP, and again, just give me this information. You see, here's all of the different information that I'm going on. And it generates an HTTP log. Then I'm going to do bro cut, and I just want the user agent and the URI. So it tells me here's the user agent that here's the URI that got requested, downloader MLR 1.0, and then these various these are the user agents, and these are the actual URIs that got requested. So internet.exe. Hey, I downloaded the whole internet just now. This is my executable of the internet. So that's what I have. Internet.exe. I don't know what that is, but does that seem a little suspicious? Yeah, internet.exe. Mail r sputnik.exe. Okay, so these are just things I can easily do to say, hey, this looks potentially like some type of suspicious behavior. Now, my classic IDSs said, hey, this stuff's clean. I don't have any rules that detect this. Because adversaries are smart. They're changing headers, they're obfuscating, they're base 64 encoding, they're encrypting, they're doing whatever they can to evade detection. So I need to be able to understand what's going on in my network. Okay? Again, looking at these various user agents, right? How many of you have a user agent called full stuff? Right, what is that? I don't even know what that is, right? So again, we can start to categorize this. My user agents look like, Mozilla 5.0, whatever. Okay, they're very long. Okay, these user agents are very, very interesting. Okay, guardmail.ru. Okay, so again, we have some interesting things here that we can look at. Now you also have bro scripting. Right, some of my favorites, bro long connections. One of the things that happens is bro has a connection log. But that connection log only gets actually generated once that FINAC goes away. Okay? So again, what bro long connection script does, it says, hey, I'm looking for a connection that's made to an external resource or between two systems that FINAC hasn't actually occurred. And it's going to categorize and say, hey, I have this connection that's been going on for 6 hours. And you're like, that seems odd. How many of your users have a persistent connection to an external or even an internal resource for 6 hours? Now, if you're doing a backup or you're doing some upload of files, that's possible. But again, those are things you can easily whitelist out. If I have a persistent or long-term connection to an external IP address out on the internet, that's something I would want to understand. And that's where bro long connection can help you identify. Even if that FINAC hasn't occurred, it goes out and looks at those bro logs and says, hey, here's was the initiation of the connection, and I haven't seen that FINAC in 3.5 hours. So I have a persistent connection between my internal system or even internal to internal that looks like some type of maybe beaconing or command and control or something that could potentially be malicious. Top DNS allows you to look at your top DNS requests. If I'm doing something like DNS tunneling, again, that's a common technique that a lot of my pen test buddies love because DNS just blends in with normal traffic. Okay, they love DNS tunneling because it goes and just easily gets out to the internet because it's DNS, right? Oh yeah, we all have to allow DNS. OS query, okay, allows me to go in and query the operating system and get information about these operating systems to understand, hey, not only am I looking at the network traffic, but I'm also getting endpoint data from this to be able to identify information. Salesforce has a couple of scripts, JA3 and SysMon, that you can take advantage of. So again, I've listed out here the various packages. So github.com/bro packages is a bunch of scripts, and then you can write your own. For whatever you want, you can, again, script it out. Okay? It's integrated into a bunch of different other products. There's an app for Splunk, API integration with something like, again, if you want to go open source and roll your own sandbox, you can go something like Cuckoo Sandbox. Now, I'll be honest with you, when I've implemented or attempted to implement Cuckoo Sandbox, it was tough. I mean, being able to find good documentation on there, being able to do it and get it to effectively do my own malware detonation type of sandbox environment took me a very long time to do it. But once you get it, what I can do is I can get an API key, and then what I'll do is I'll take those Zeek logs, I'll go in and capture those, submit them all the way into Cuckoo Sandbox. Cuckoo Sandbox can then go through and detonate them and say, hey, here's what these particular Sandbox does, and then generate a risk score, and then I can submit that back into my SIM and say, hey, anything with a risk score greater than 5, let me go ahead and generate an alert and take some action on it, investigate. Okay. Also, threat intelligence feed, natively integrate Intel Critical Stack, the malware information sharing platform, Open Threat Exchange, and then for everything else, there's a script. You can write your own script. There's a programming interface that allows you to be able to integrate it with multiple different products, right? So again, if I do something like Intel Critical Stack, what I do is I go up and I say, here's the threat feeds that I want to basically apply to. I want to go in and I want to get malware domain list. I want to get blacklist, black hole domains. And then it generates an API key. I put that into Zeek or into Security Onion, and then now a brand new log gets generated by Zeek called the Intel log. And then with that Intel log, I can correlate that and say, hey, there's an HTTP request to this domain that is part of malwaredomainlist.com. And then I can alert on that. I can take some action. I can go out and I can have it integrated and scripted into my various different network appliances to go out and just go and delete that. Now, I'm going to do a quick demo. Hopefully it will work. I have just a few minutes, but just kind of show you what some of the things you can do with this. Okay, so if I have something here, and so in here, we'll just clear this out. Okay, so here in this I have dems, this is VRootWorm. So in here, right, you see I have extract files and I have the VRootWorm.pcap. So I have a pcap that has some malware in it. I have a bunch of different pcaps that we did some malware analysis on it. So if I do bro tac r, oops, if I could type, that'd be great. And then I just do VRootWorm.pcap. So right now, all I have is extract files in VRootWorm.pcap. But as soon as I do that, right, bro takes a couple seconds, and now you see I have all of these logs. I have a con log, I have HTTP log, I have a weird log, which is just weird files, you know, stuff that bro's like, hey, that's not what I expect this protocol to look like. Okay, that should be TCP, but it looks weird, right? There's some weird window sizes, maybe there's some fragmentation going on. There's some stuff that I don't expect to see in this traffic. Okay, IRC, hey, there's some IRC traffic going on. That's odd. How many of you have IRC traffic on your network? Sometimes you do, but in some cases, I'd want to know about that. DNS log, con log, file log. So again, it just understands these various protocols and says, here's what I expect to see. So if I were to go in and I were to just cat this log, right, let me just do this. I'm going to do head, and I'll do con log. Okay, so you see here, these are the various different fields, right? So again, this is the thing I don't really like about Zeek. Their field names are crazy, right? You know, you could tell this was created in an academic environment because their field names are something would only be generated in an academic environment. So id.orig_h. Okay, what does that sound like to you? Who knows, right? That's the source IP address. That makes sense, right? id.orig_h. Source IP, yeah, hey, that's what I would have chosen. But hey, that's what they chose. So when you're doing some of this integration, you're going to want to change those names to something that is probably going to be more valuable, right? If you're ingesting into a SIM, you're going to want to normalize the data, obviously. But it's tab delimited. Here's our various fields, right? So we have UID.UID here is that unique identifier for every one of these various logs, right? And so here you have source IP, source port, destination IP, destination port, protocol, service duration. Hey, that's good, right? I got a connection log, I have the duration. I said that con log only gets duration when it actually fin-acts. So that prolonged connection will look in this con log for, or look at the network traffic to see, hey, I've got something that's not in the con log, but is actually been a long duration of connection. Okay, so it'll look across all this data. But in the con log, that duration is valuable because if I have a long connection to an IP address out on the internet, that's something that I would want to understand. I may want to categorize and say, here are my top talkers. Here are the ones with the highest number of connections. Here's the ones with the longest duration. And this can give me a lot of information. So here's what I have. This is just some valuable information. So I can just let me go in and just show you some of the stuff I would normally do. I get this data, and I'm like, okay, that's valuable, but it's kind of hard to read. So what I would probably do is I'll just grep for this, and I'll go in and what do I want? I just want to print out the field names first, so I can get a list of the field names. So I'm going to grep, and I'm just going to go in and I'll do something like this. Let me make sure I do this right, because my regex, I'll admit, takes me a while to do regex here. But again, we see all the field names start with the pound, right? So again, I want to just pull in anything that starts with pound. So I'm going in and saying, hey, grep, just show me. I'm going to do some regular expression. I want to say anything that starts with the pound. And let me do this here. So grep for that. I think it's backwards. Do it this way. I'm going to get this back. I'm going to get this wrong the first time, and then I'll get it right the second time. So I'm grepping anything that starts with pound, right? And then I'm going to filter this out. So I'm going to go in. C/T. I'm just going to trim it out here and then replace it with this and just a new line character just to put this on each one. Okay. So again, I told you I was going to get it wrong the first time. Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you. So backwards, I knew it was wrong the first time. I don't need this one here. There we go. So again, here we go. That's not what I wanted. Why is it wrong? So it should have been here. That's interesting. So anything starts with the pound, con log. So here's what I should have got. So interesting. So I got the UID, right? Timestamp UID, ID.orig_HP, right? So here's what I wanted, right? I want this information. I got my service duration, original bytes. I just wanted to print those out so that way I could see that. And so now, what do I want to do? Well, I want to just start to parse this data out, okay? So again, these are the ones. So what I would want to do is I can just go in and I can cat the con log. And then I can use a tool right here. It has a built-in bro cut, which is a shell script that allows me to just cut these fields right out of bro. Okay. So again, I want to get in and I want to cut out. Let's say I just want to pull in I'm going to do it human readable. So I'm going to do -D. I'm going to do the timestamp, and then I want to pull in ID.orig_H ID. I just want that 5 tuple information. .orig_P response ID.response _H, and then ID.response_P, and then the proto. Okay. So now I'm able to pull that information out, right? So easily I can parse this data out, right? So again, I got the timestamp, I got the source IP, source port, destination IP, destination port, and again, that gives me some useful, and some of this we're like, okay, hey, wait a second, that seems kind of odd, okay? We're seeing some data, and we're like, okay, well, I want to parse this data out, and now what I also want to pull out, I'm going to pull in my FUID, right? So again, if I go in, because that FUID is going to give me that useful information. I should just put it to head, but That's okay. This is a con log. So these are all the connections that are going port. So here we have some traffic going to 445. Okay, so the Microsoft SMB traffic. So again, and then I can just grep and start filtering out just the various traffic that I'm interested in. Let me say I'm just interested into something that is, I just want to know what's going to port 80. So I can grep for port 80 on that, right? So I can pipe this to grep 80, and you can see here's all the 80 stuff, right? So again, and I can even go in a little bit further. Instead of going to grep, I can awk it, and I can just pull out just what's going into field number, right? Oh, maybe the destination of port 80, right? So again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me just go in and pull that data out, right? So again, let me go in here. So I'll just type this. I'll just print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so again, I just want to print out the various ones. So again, here I'm just printing out, and these are the various source ports, and then I want to just go in and I'll sort that, and then I'll sort it. Okay, so these are now I have all the list of all the various destination ports I had. Okay, so I can say, okay, well, port 1, that's interesting. 133, 137, 139. These are relatively interesting. And again, so I'm just looking at the data here, right? So I'm just pulling out and saying, okay, hey, there's some different traffic that I would want to be interested in. And so now I'm like, okay, well, which ones am I really interested in? Well, I'm interested in maybe, hey, anything going to port 555. That's interesting. Well, what is 555? I don't know what that is, but maybe I'm just interested in that 555 traffic. So I can go in and then just start to parse out that data. So I can go in here instead of printing here. So I can go, I'll go awk, and I'll do, let me think of what I want to do here. So I want to awk, and I want to do, we'll do awk where $5 equals and 555, and then we'll just pull that out. So I just want to pull in where that port equals 555. So let's see if this works. So again, now I just have all the data that's equal to 555. So these are all the connections here going to 555. And you see here I'm going from 192.168.2.31 to 110.79.172.93. Okay, so again, there's a communication, and then so it's going from 31, 31, 32, 44, 30, 31, 47. So now I'm saying, okay, well, there's some communication. So obviously 10.179.172.193 is listening on port 555. So what does that mean? Well, what is on port 555? I don't know what that is. That's not a standard port for my environment. So I have a local machine, a 10.IP address, which is a RFC 1918 IP address, listening on port 555. And all of these other internal machines are communicating with it. Okay, so let me go in and understand that traffic and say, okay, why is this machine listening on a non-standard port, something I've never heard of? I don't know. It's not 80, it's not 443, it's not 445, it's not one that I would expect to have. And then I can go in and then look at this traffic and then correlate it with other different sources. So I can pull in the FUID from here, and I can say, let me pull in addition to this, let me pull in the FUID. And again, I didn't really set this demo up. Right, I just went ahead and said, I want to pull bro-d. I just kind of am spitballing here on stuff that I would do if I'm doing some hunting. Okay. Let me pull out the. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, because there we go. Well, that's. I went to the wrong one. Change this in 6. Thank you. So again, here I would pull in this FUID, and so now I have this FUID of this one here. Okay, so maybe I'm interested in just this one. I want to see the traffic going from 31, right? Because 31 has the most connections here. So I'm really interested in maybe just pulling out one of these, or maybe let's say I have some other information, some internal knowledge that says, hey, I know that 192.168.2.47. Hey, I know that's the main jump box I use to connect to my DMZ systems. So this is the one I'm concerned with. So maybe I just want to pull in this FUID. So C3FOC right here. So let me just copy this one. So if I'm interested in the 147, and again, this is just kind of the type of things I would do. Again, I didn't really plan this out how I wanted to do this, but so then I could just grep for that. Again, so I just want to grep for that fluid in star.log. Okay, so now you see here I have that fluid on con.log. I have another file on irc.log. So there's some IRC traffic going across here, right? So it looks like some IRC traffic going here between this IP address and this IP address. So again, that's information I could use to be able to determine, hey, there looks like there's some IRC channel going between these two systems. And by being able to just filter out that data, I can start to understand whether that's normal, whether it's abnormal. Okay, so again, it's just giving me just the ability to better understand my environment, know normal, so that I can start to identify, hey, wait a second, that's weird, right? Like my wife used to do when she comes in and the lamp's turned, whoa, something's odd, something's strange. Let me investigate, and then put the kids in separate rooms and say, hey, which one of you broke the lamp? And neither of them did it, right? I have 2 daughters. My youngest, she would have been like, just broke down crying. My middle daughter, she would have been like, wasn't me, Dad, wasn't me at all. And she would lie right to my face. And to this day, she can tell me, and again, I love him to death, but that's what she'll do, right? But again, by being able to look at this data, I can start to see and say, okay, let me break this down. Let me figure out, hey, now we have these all connections are going to, and this is just doing it on the fly here, command line kung fu style, right? I could script this out. I could start to pull this information in. Other thing I can do is I could go in and with a Bro, with some of the capabilities of Bro, you see here that I have this extract file. So if I cd into extract files here, right, you see here's all the files that got extracted, right? So again, these are all the various extracted files. So it automatically has the ability to extract that. So then I could take that and script this out, send it over to my FortiGate sandbox and have them inspect all that traffic for me. Or I can send it to wherever I want. I can run a virus scanner on it, right? I can just run clam scan against it on this machine and say, here's what's going on. I can submit it up to VirusTotal and say, hey, what do you know about these files? And it's all, I can do this in the script, easily automate it and say, hey, then I get some traffic and I'm going in and alerting on this and investigating. Now, this isn't real time, but again, it's a way for me to understand my network traffic. And it's free, it's open source. I drop in some sensors, I analyze the data, I need to know normal in my environment. And again, all I have to do is just do a little bit of scripting capability and start to filter out that traffic and start to understand what's normal. Here's all these various files that were extracted automatically. Zeek does that for me. And then I can do whatever I want with those files. I can, again, I can analyze them however I want. So I can do clam scan against it, right? So one of the things I did earlier, so run that on clam scan. So lastly, I ran and I created this Yara file because I know that I mentioned I was going to do Yara. And so what I did is I went and created just a basic Yara file. And Yara is just a way to do really fast file analysis, okay? And it's signature based, right? So it's easily evaded, but it's another detection point. Like the FortiGate guys are saying, we want to layer on these various different controls. I don't want to rely on just my sandbox to do it. I don't want to just rely on my antivirus. I want to have multiple different controls. So that way, if they evade my sandbox, if they get around my antivirus, I have my Yara rule that can do that. So here's what I wrote this Yara rule. And let's go in here. Relax. So clam scan was killed. So if I were to go in here, so let's do /labs, demos, Yara 13. So Yara, I run Yara against it, and then I just tell it the Yara file that I want to apply to it. And I'll call this, what did I call it? I think I called it cutwhale.yar. And then I'm going to run this against /labs, demos, solidity, demos, solidity. Okay. So again, you see how quickly it runs it against all these extracted files, and it tells me, hey, this particular file here, extract 123.057.1970 HTTPFMR, was hit on the rule solidity 3. And so again, this is a real basic rule. It's just looking for a basic signature of some type of malware. Okay, now again, this isn't foolproof. It can easily be evaded, but the more controls you have in place, the better you're going to be able to protect yourself against advanced type of threats. Okay, so again, I run Yara against it, and again, I just extracted those files, and I can automate this, right? I'm doing this all manually, but this is easily scriptable. I can just have Bro extract the files, submit it over into a network share, and then have it constantly being scanned with my Yara engine looking for signatures of malware. And then as I'm going in and analyzing this, I'm getting new samples, I'm testing it, I'm using tools against this, right? I go in here and I can just do, let's say I can do bless against extract 04. Okay, so again, I can then run go in and use some type of hex editor and say, okay, hey, what am I looking for? Okay, well, obviously, right, it's a DOS executable. We see the MZ, right, Mike Zibikowski or whatever. And, again, so we can go through here and just look for signatures of what this malware looks like. And again, it's easy for attackers to evade it, but, that's kind of the way we would do this to automate some of this detection in something like Zeek. And then we can submit it to some type of sandbox. Okay, so I know that was pretty quick, and we're running out of time because, the anime club's going in here, and we don't want to interrupt that at all. So what questions do you have in the last couple minutes that hopefully I can answer?
How much time does it take to set all this up?
Security Onion takes about 15 minutes, right? So again, those sensors are really easy, right? That's why it's one of my favorite ways to do it, because it's all automatically set up. You just download the image, you put it on a virtual machine or on a physical machine, install it on a virtual machine, and then put it on a remote sensor. And the way Security Onion works is you have remote sensors and then a master node, and the only thing that gets sent to the master node is your alert data. All of the PCAP, all of the metadata stays on those remote sensors, so you can have much smaller hardware environment to where all of your remote sensors are running, smaller hardware, and your master node is just centralizing those alerts. And then when you do your investigation, you look at the alerts, and then you can easily pivot to the remote sensors where the metadata and the PCAPs are actually stored.
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it a whole lot.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Some of our more regular speakers, and he speaks numerous times throughout the year and gives us details. Do you have any topics that you want to